Are you ready to face something that has no name but leaves scars? It's time to discover what lies beyond the light. Only if you are ready to face the deepest horror should you step inside. We're opening doors to a world where every rustle hides a dreadful secret, and every step might be your last. What evil lurks behind these walls? What dark forces awaken in the night's silence? What happens when your deepest fears begin to haunt your consciousness? Leave all hope and comfort behind. Turn on the light if you dare, and be ready to discover what hides in the darkest corners of your fear.
In the heart of a decaying metropolis, where the remnants of a once bustling subway lay forgotten, a team of paranormal investigators gathered to delve into the chilling mysteries of Ghost Station. This group, composed of seasoned experts, was well versed in the eerie and the unexplained, each member drawn together by a shared fascination with the spectral realm. Leading the team was Dr. Evelyn Carter, a psychologist with a passion for understanding the human psyche's response to fear. Her analytical mind was often complemented by James Jax Thompson, a tech-savvy skeptic who approached every investigation with a healthy dose of doubt, relying on gadgets and instruments to capture the unseen. Alongside them was Clara Rivers, a medium with a deep sensitivity to spirits, whose intuitive approach often bridged the gap between the living and the dead. Finally, there was Marco, the team's cameraman, whose adventurous spirit and penchant for the dramatic added a layer of suspense to their escapades. The abandoned subway station they were investigating was a relic of a bygone era, a hulking structure that loomed ominously beneath the city. Once a vital transport hub, it now lay shrouded in darkness, its platforms overgrown with weeds and littered with debris. The air was thick with an unsettling silence, broken only by the distant echo of dripping water and the occasional scurry of unseen creatures. Faded posters clung to the walls, remnants of a time when life flowed through this underground labyrinth, now replaced by a heavy sense of foreboding. As the investigators made their way deeper into the bowels of the station, they could feel an oppressive weight in the air, as if the very walls were alive with memories of the past. Reports had surfaced of brutal deaths occurring within these confines, passengers trapped in tragic accidents, wanderers meeting their untimely demise, and tales of sinister figures lurking in the shadows. Locals avoided the area, whispering about strange occurrences, disembodied voices echoing through the tunnels, flickering lights that seemed to have a mind of their own, and the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. The team's motivations to explore this haunted realm were not merely for thrills. They sought to uncover the truth behind the station's dark history. As they prepared to begin their investigation, the atmosphere grew thick with tension, and an unshakable sense of dread settled over them. The station, with its twisting tunnels and shadowy corners, beckoned them forward, but they were unaware that the very spirits they sought to understand would soon begin to weave their own sinister narrative, ensnaring the team in a web of terror that would challenge their resolve and sanity. With their equipment set up and cameras rolling, the team took their first cautious steps into the eerie depths of the subway station. The dim beam of their flashlights flickered against the walls, casting elongated shadows that danced with every movement. Dr. Carter held a voice recorder, ready to capture any ethereal whispers, while Jax monitored the electromagnetic field readings, his skepticism palpable. Clara walked slightly ahead, her senses heightened as she felt the intensity of the energies surrounding them. Marco trailed behind, capturing the moment with his camera, eager to document whatever they encountered. As they ventured further into the station, Jax was the first to experience something unsettling. He set down his equipment near an old ticket booth, the dust swirling in the air as he leaned closer to examine the faded signage. Suddenly, a cold gust of wind swept through the station, though there were no open exits. The temperature dropped, and the lights flickered ominously. Jax's breath hitched as he caught sight of a figure in a tattered coat, its face obscured by shadows. The specter pointed a bony finger at him, its mouth moving silently. Jax felt an icy grip around his heart. A desperate plea for help echoed in his mind, urging him to remember something lost long ago. The apparition vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Jax shaken and questioning his rationality. Next, Clara wandered off down a deserted platform. As she closed her eyes, attempting to connect with the spirits, she felt a rush of sorrow wash over her. A woman's anguished wail pierced the silence, and Clara opened her eyes to find herself face to face with a ghostly figure clad in a vintage dress, tears streaming down her translucent cheeks. The spirit's story unfolded in Clara's mind. She had been a bride who perished on her wedding day, trapped in a moment of despair. The ghost demanded that Clara find her lost wedding ring, a symbol of her unfulfilled love. Overwhelmed, Clara could hardly speak, as the weight of the spirit's sorrow pressed heavily upon her. Meanwhile, Dr. Carter and Marco ventured into a darkened tunnel where the air felt thick and oppressive. As they moved deeper, they began to hear distant laughter echoing off the walls, growing louder until it was almost unbearable. Marco captured it all on camera, his heart racing. Suddenly, they were confronted by a ghostly child, her eyes wide with fear and longing. She reached out with small hands, begging for help to find her mother, lost in the chaos of a tragic accident. Dr. Carter felt a sharp pang of empathy, but also a creeping dread. The child's essence seemed to twist reality around them, blurring the lines between time and space. As the investigators grappled with the emotional weight of their encounters, they remained unaware that a sinister force was at play, drawing them further into the ghostly realm. The psychological toll of the spirits began to manifest in alarming ways. Jax, who had always relied on logic and skepticism, found himself plagued by visions that grew increasingly vivid and unsettling. In the isolation of the station, shadows began to morph into figures from his past, his childhood home, the ghost of a long-lost friend who had succumbed to addiction, and a looming sense of guilt that wrapped around him like a shroud. The whispers of the spirits twisted his memories, dredging up emotions he had buried long ago, eliciting a growing paranoia that he was being watched, judged, and perhaps even haunted by his own choices. Dr. Carter, meanwhile, struggled to maintain her composure. The very foundation of her psychological expertise was shaken as she experienced hallucinations that challenged her understanding of reality. She began to see apparitions of patients she had failed to help, each one embodying her deepest fears of inadequacy. Their anguished expressions and desperate pleas echoed in her mind, causing her to question her abilities and the ethics of her profession. The line between the living and the dead blurred as she found herself drawn into a spiral of self-doubt that threatened to engulf her. Clara's intuitive connection to the spirits deepened, but it came at a cost. Each interaction left her emotionally drained as the sorrow of the ghosts seeped into her very being. The spirits began to exploit her empathy, confronting her with images of her own lost loved ones. She found herself reliving the pain of her past, a tragic loss that she had never fully processed. As the ghosts whispered their demands, Clara felt her resolve weakening, the emotional weight threatening to crush her spirit entirely. Marco, the team's cameraman, was not immune to the psychological warfare at play. As he reviewed his footage, he noticed strange distortions faces appearing in the shadows of the frames, and echoes of cries that seemed to resonate from the depths of the station. The thrill of adventure morphed into a consuming dread as he felt the presence of the spirits looming over him, mocking his attempts to capture their essence. He began to perceive the station as a living entity, a malevolent force that fed off their fears, drawing them deeper into its dark embrace. The station transformed into a labyrinth of psychological traps, where the investigators were not merely observers, but unwilling participants in a twisted game. it became increasingly clear that the investigators were not just there to document the haunting. They were caught in a perilous struggle for their own minds, teetering on the brink of madness as they faced the demons of the station and the darker recesses of their own psyches. As the tension reached a boiling point, the team found themselves trapped in a cycle of blame and mistrust. Each encounter with the spirits became a trigger, igniting old resentments and insecurities. The station, with its labyrinthine tunnels and oppressive energy, seemed to conspire against them, amplifying their fears and doubts. The ghosts, aware of the turmoil they had sown, reveled in their discord, feeding off the emotional chaos that swirled like a storm around them. As the walls of the station closed in, the team found themselves at a crossroads, facing the terrifying possibility that the true horror lay not in the ghosts, but within themselves. The air was thick with tension as the paranormal team realized they had been ensnared in a meticulously crafted trap. The spirits that had once seemed like mere echoes of the past now revealed their true, malevolent nature. The subway station, with its decaying walls and flickering lights, pulsated with an energy that felt almost sentient, a dark force manipulating their fears and desires, drawing them deeper into its web. Jax, consumed by paranoia, was the first to voice the unthinkable.
"They want us here. They're feeding off our fear."
His voice trembled, barely concealing the deep-seated dread that had taken root in his mind. Dr. Carter, battling her own hallucinations, could only nod, her heart racing as she felt the ghost's icy fingers grazing her psyche, urging her to surrender to despair.
"Stay together,"
Clara shouted, her voice rising above the cacophony of whispers that filled the station. But even as she tried to rally her friends, the spirits intensified their assault. Each ghost began to project their anguish, their stories intertwining and warping reality around them. The voices morphed into a deafening chorus, each plea and accusation amplifying their internal struggles. Marco, holding the camera to capture their final moments, felt a cold wave wash over him. The lens captured more than just the physical realm, it recorded the emotional decay of his teammates.
"We need to leave. Now,"
he shouted, his voice barely breaking through the din of supernatural chaos. As they stumbled through the station, a familiar figure emerged from the shadows, Clara's ghostly bride, her wedding dress tattered and soaked in despair.
"You cannot leave,"
she whispered, her voice a haunting melody that sent shivers down their spines.
"You owe us. You must atone for your sins."
The weight of the spirit's demands crashed over them, each investigator confronted with their darkest regrets. Jax, overwhelmed by the psychic pressure, broke from the group, racing down an adjacent tunnel.
"They're lying. We can't help them."
But the moment he turned, he was met by a spectral figure from his past, a friend lost to addiction, its eyes reflecting his guilt. He faltered, the air thickening, trapping him in a phantasmagoria of his own making. Clara, feeling the weight of the bride's grief, grasped Marco's arm as they attempted to pull Jax back.
"We can't leave him,"
she yelled. But as they neared, the station itself seemed to constrict, narrowing the path before them. The walls pulsed with a sinister rhythm, and the flickering lights blinked in a rhythm that mirrored their racing hearts. With a surge of adrenaline, Marco swung his camera around, capturing the horror unfolding as the spirits coalesced into a swirling tempest of rage and sorrow.
"We need to find the source. There's something in the control room,"
he urged, desperation lacing his words. The team rallied, their collective will igniting a flicker of hope amidst the encroaching darkness. In a final push, they raced toward the control room, the station fighting back. Shadows lunged at them, grasping hands of despair reaching for their souls.
"We are more than your pasts,"
Clara shouted, her voice rising above the cacophony.
"You cannot claim us."
As they burst into the room, the air crackled with energy, and they found themselves surrounded by remnants of the station's history, old photographs, forgotten belongings of those who had perished here. The truth hit them like a wave. The spirits were not just lost souls, they were the very embodiment of the station's tortured past, each one a vessel of unresolved pain, clamoring for recognition. In that moment of clarity, they understood. The only way to escape was to confront the darkness within themselves. They joined hands, forming a circle of unity, and began to share their own stories of regret and loss, each word a balm against the turmoil that sought to consume them. The oppressive grip of the station weakened as they embraced their vulnerabilities, transforming their fear into a collective strength. But the spirits, sensing their resolve, roared in rage. The shadows writhed, and the very foundations of the station trembled. The investigators knew their time was running out. With one last surge of will, they called upon the spirits to find peace, urging them to release their hold on the living. The walls shuddered, and a blinding light engulfed the room as the spirits began to dissipate, their cries morphing from rage to relief. Their desperate fight for survival culminated in a cacophony of sound and light, a battle not just for their lives but for the very essence of their souls. As the station began to collapse around them, they raced toward the exit, propelled by the fading echoes of the spirits they had finally acknowledged. The air crackled with tension as the paranormal team emerged from the crumbling confines of the abandoned subway station, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. The haunting shadows that had once loomed over them receded, but the scars of their encounter would linger long after they escaped. As sunlight bathed their faces, a bittersweet victory washed over them. They had survived, but at an immense cost. Jax, once a skeptic, now grappled with the reality of his experiences. The vivid memories of his past traumas haunted him relentlessly. Dr. Carter found herself in a similar battle, the specters of her former patients haunting her thoughts. The weight of their disappointment and the echoes of their suffering became a burden too heavy to bear. She sought therapy, hoping to process her trauma and regain her professional composure. But the memories of the ghosts in the subway station taunted her, blurring the line between patient and spirit. Clara was perhaps the most affected, her deep sensitivity to the spirits leaving her emotionally raw. She had formed a connection with the sorrowful bride and felt the loss of her unfulfilled dreams deeply. The burden of the ghost stories weighed heavily on her heart. Marco, the cameraman, became obsessed with documenting the fallout of their harrowing experience. He filled his days with interviews and podcasts, desperately trying to make sense of what they had encountered. Yet, the footage he had captured in the station haunted him. Each viewing revealed not just the terror they had faced, but the disintegration of their camaraderie. As the weeks passed, the investigators found themselves in a perpetual state of anxiety, their minds replaying the chilling encounters that had unfolded in the dark depths of the station. Each member of the team had escaped physically, but they were ensnared by their psychological scars. The shadows of the subway station had followed them into the light, their experiences serving as a constant reminder of the thin veil that separates the living from the dead. Despite the trauma, the team felt an unspoken bond emerging from the ashes of their shared experience. They began to reach out to one another, slowly rebuilding the trust that had frayed in the chaos. Group therapy sessions became a refuge where they could share their stories, confront their fears, and navigate the complex emotions that lingered. Through vulnerability, they found a flicker of hope, a pathway toward healing. The dark legacy of the subway station remained, a reminder of the lives lost and the stories left untold. The once abandoned place became a site of local intrigue, drawing in thrill seekers and ghost hunters alike, feeding the cycle of fascination with the supernatural.